So good afternoon, everyone. QFF Energy Savers team has joined the webinar craze, so thanks for joining us. This second webinar in our series is on some of the findings from the energy audits we're conducting under the Energy Savers program. I'd like to welcome the Energy Savers team from QFF, John Hay and Rebecca Takal, and also our very special guest, Ryan Dillon from Webster's. So just as a bit of housekeeping, we have everyone muted with no video, but please feel free to use the chat column, the chat section on your screen there to ask any questions or make any comments as we go through. The plan is to go for about 45 minutes, but we're happy to keep going if there's any questions and discussion. I'm just going to give a quick rundown on the Energy Savers program. Then Ryan's going to talk about energy audits and jelly beans. And then there's time for questions at the end. You'll see a poll in your screen there, and I'd ask you to please have a quick look at that. And it's only a few check boxes, but we're keen to find out more about you, what you're interested in, and also we're asking you to guess the number of jelly beans, but I'll come to that in a sec. So just on the Energy Savers project itself, it's a program that's being funded by the Department of Natural Resources, Mines and Energy, and QFF are delivering it in conjunction with all of our member bodies, whose logos you can see along the bottom of the screen there. The program's part of the Queensland Government's $2 billion affordable energy plan, and aims to assist agricultural businesses identify and realise energy savings and productivity improvements. So at its core, the program involves 200 audits to the Australian standard on farms, and also provides a rebate for farmers who have an audit done to claim up to $20,000, being up to 50% of some of the recommendations from the audits that they implement. I'll just give you a bit of an indication of the kinds of outcomes we're seeing from the program so far. So these are the farming sectors that are represented in the audits. So we're covering a good range of farming sectors throughout Queensland, and also we've got a very good geographic spread. So we're covering farms from the Atherton Tablelands all the way down the east coast, out to Emerald and Longreach, and down to St George. So a really good coverage of farms right across all of those sectors. Why are we doing energy audits? Because the energy audits, there are three types of energy audits under the Australian standard. It's because they follow a systematic process and they deliver quality, tangible results. They're sort of bankable documents that provide, identify areas in the business, ways to reduce energy consumption, carbon emissions, and improve productivity. And these are some of the potential savings to date. We've collated some of these from the first 127 audits through. So between them, they're saving over 5,700,000 kilowatt hours, which is nearly $2 million in energy costs, and over 5,000 tonnes in carbon dioxide, carbon emissions. And you can see how those energy savings in kilowatt hours are spread across those sectors. These are the kinds of recommendations that we're seeing in the audits. With those sectors that I showed, it'll be no surprise that most of the recommendations are in pumping and irrigation, right through from pump maintenance through to irrigation system changes, installation of VSDs, replacements of pumps, and replacement of pump with VSD in situations. And then some of the other recommendations, there's a big range of projects in cooling and heating, insulation, biogas, and power factor correction. So we're really covering not just the irrigation systems, but the farm sheds and some of the on-farm processing. As far as solar, we're asking the auditors to provide the farms with the ideal size solar for the farm based on the historic energy consumption. And you can see the range of systems that the auditors have recommended there, from 5 kilowatts generally up to 30. The reason they tend to peak at 30 is because above that, they're no longer considered a micro-embedded generating unit in Queensland, so it's a more complicated process to get them connected to the grid. But nevertheless, there are a couple of larger systems that we've that have been recommended on some larger farms there. Now to the jelly beans, and this is a good segue into our next speaker. So Ryan, who's actually on site in that photo behind me, actually from a cotton farm in Brookstead. After he'd finished 10 of the audits from his 10 of his horticulture audits with Grocon, he delivered this jar of jelly beans to Katrina there, pictured with John. And those each jelly bean represents $1,000 worth of savings over 10 years from all of those 10 audits. So what we're going to ask you to do, and you'll see the numbers there in the poll, is take a guess on how many you think are in that. There's the poll there. Take a guess on how many you think might be in that jar, and whoever's closest will get some contact details off you and stick in the post a little plug-in power meter. So yeah, feel free to have a go at that poll, and we'll announce the winner at the end of the webinar. So I think that's, I'm about to hand over the sharing of the screen.
Great.
To you, Ryan.
Lots of jelly beans, and thanks everyone for joining us today. Really appreciate everyone taking. Obviously, just share this screen here. You've got that there. Is it up there now, guys?
Yep.
Fantastic. So wanted to just start first and foremost, just thanking, in no particular order, Andrew, John, Rebecca, and all the team at QFF, as well as our partners, Lara, Sarah from Queensland Dairy Farmers, David and Ian from NGIQ, and Katrina and the whole team at Grocom. Really appreciate your efforts, and it's been a fantastic project. And I suppose more or less the summary of today is to have a look at those jelly beans and what those savings represent, and we'll have a look at that total number at the end. But just in essence, more or less reflect on what some of the lessons learned industry-wide are, just for those particular industries, horticulture, nursery, and dairy, to identify what kind of jelly beans you might be able to save on site, and then for further programs or just for anyone interested generally, how does energy efficiency stack up, particularly financially, now that we've done so much work, and there's just a real depth of lessons learned there, having audited to the standard when we have a look at some averages across sectors. So I'll briefly touch base on the potential of energy efficiency for a couple of minutes, and then go into some of those jelly bean savings, the industrial energy efficiency concepts in terms of the on-bill cost savings, and then also the non-energy benefits and what some of the averages look like across sectors from a project finance perspective. This is probably the most complex slide in the presentation here, so I'll take a little bit of time to explain the relevance of this in the context of why energy efficiency is important. I saw this in a recent presentation, and it really captured my attention. It's within an American context, and it measures energy in quads, or quadrillion British thermal units, which is imperial unit. On the left-hand side here, all the colours over here on the left-hand side are the source of energy, and this is an economic-wide overview of energy use in the whole economy in the States. You can see here, for instance, if you follow the natural gas or the light blue, some of that goes to electric generation. And then on the right-hand side there in pink, you've got your residential, commercial, industrial, and transportation sectors. Now from left to right, if we take natural gas in the light blue, that might go straight to industrial. And from there you can see, importantly, and this is the thing I wanted to point out there, we've got on the right-hand side there, the rejected energy and the energy services. And Andrew mentioned a phrase that he'd heard of, value-added energy. So energy services or value-added energy is effectively how much of that energy on the left is going towards, say, for instance, turning that electric motor and providing a function for a business. And the light grey is basically how much heat or rejected energy. So you can see there's 32 quads for energy services or value-added energy, something providing a function in the economy. And the other 68 quads are actually rejected. So basically 2/3 of energy is rejected in regards to the efficiency in which it's used, whether it's being put to work in providing a function for a business. So with energy efficiency being a discipline for the last 40 years, it's just an interesting reflection that there is so much potential in efficiency. A lot of that's obviously inherently locked in, but there's also a lot of unlocked or unused potential in businesses. And while there's not necessarily key metrics for horticulture or dairies or nursery across the whole economy, where these audits add a little bit of value, perhaps just for a little bit of reflection, is how do we actually benchmark in horticulture what that savings potential is. So we'll get to that exact number across 10 medium to large horticultural facilities a little bit later with that prize there. But otherwise, in some of those key sectors, kicking off with dairy, for instance, after the level 2 audit, in most of these instances for the 3 sites examined, we had between 35 to 50% reduction in energy costs was available that was cost effective with a combination of energy efficiency and some advanced renewables. So really interesting to see across the board, 35 to 50% is actually still available and cost effective. So going through what some of those jelly beans actually were within dairy, we've got a few icons here with the major energy savings, moderate energy savings using a different icon here, as well as some definite priority areas of investigation and findings from the audit, just to use a bit of the icons here to kind of highlight what was more or less important and within your site, what you should definitely look out for. So one of the priority areas was compressed air. Now, the chart here on the right, on the bottom, shows the diameter of a leak. And you can see here the kilowatt hours saved through fixing that leak on the y-axis. So in this example, a 3 mil diameter leak or combinations of leaks, in fact, could have around 25,900 kilowatt hours in energy wastage. Now, compressed air is often called the 4th utility: energy, water, gas, and compressed air. In the compressed air's 80 to 90% of heat or rejected energy that doesn't provide that value-added energy, and compressed air is just really expensive. So looking for leaks did bear some results within the audits, and something to definitely look out on in your facility and not underestimate what's that actually costing you. Moving into refrigeration, we can see here an example of a negative feedback loop. So this is a milk tank where you've got a dairy milking cows, 38 to 36 degrees, say, warm milk coming in there, needs to be refrigerated. And the thermal image on the right just shows the hot air that's coming out of a condensing unit, basically refrigerating that tank in the photo on the left in the middle. Now that hot air is being pushed onto the tank, and some of the airflow is actually going into a set of fans and condensers on the other side of the tank. So it's pushing out hot air onto the tank, warming up that tank. It's insulated, but it does have an impact. And then that hot air is then being sucked out some refrigeration equipment on the other side. So it's a negative feedback loop. What you're refrigerating, you're rejecting that heat and putting it back on the tank. And it's a few of these smaller changes in terms of what can you actually do about that unit to change the pattern of airflow to then not have these kind of simple, quick wins. And a lot of the lessons from the audits were where those quick wins were. All those, I nearly said how many jelly beans there were, sorry, all those jelly beans. It was the case of finding 10 to 15 of those, per site. And that's what really added up to significant energy cost savings in the long term So don't underestimate the power of trying to find your 10 to 15 projects. It can be a lot of work, but it can be really rewarding, and the cost savings really do add up. Those simple quick wins such as pipe insulation. Again, we see a refrigeration unit, and though the heat rejected from this condensing unit here is coming onto the pipe, and the pipe would normally be insulated, and just in the handheld thermometer, you can see the surface temperature of that pipe is 11 degrees. It's carrying a cooler refrigerant, and the photo on the right shows that refrigerant going through the wall, through to a milk vat, and that's sitting at 4 degrees. So you're picking up extra temperature, and it's more or less a question of how to get the house in order, some general maintenance around insulation there. Moving into more some of the key bits of equipment within dairies, plate coolers. A plate cooler takes warm milk in, and you're using ambient water or rainwater, bore water that you run across a plate adjacent to the milk flowing through. So you're actually getting free refrigeration or free cooling, call it, except for the just small incremental cost of the pump. Now, pretty much most of these units in dairies hadn't had the correct ratio of flow, or 2 to 3 ratio of water to milk to get the best heat transfer characteristics. A lot of the time they hadn't been cleaned. Some of the positioning of the storage tanks actually had heat gain just by where they're located. And in one instance, a really good quick win was we found a plate cooler where there was an irrigation channel and there was a bore. Now, part of the reason why this wasn't performing, the plate cooler, was it was getting dirty from when the water quality wasn't as good in the irrigation channel. The bore water was cleaner, and it was also colder. There was a few $100s worth of polypipe that could actually be used to then use the bore water as at certain times a cooler source of water. And in that instance, a few $100s worth of polypipe would save around $5 grand. So definitely a few jelly beans and a few ways of just thinking about energy and how do you optimize some of the existing systems. So from getting the house in order and doing some of the small quick wins, some of the more advanced renewables. In this instance, when you're milking cows, you've got a morning and afternoon spike typically, where all the equipment, all the refrigeration comes on to bring that milk down to temperature. The resultant energy consumption is seen in that curve there with the current or the load profile of the site. Now, the solar generation, being majority in the middle of the day, means that if you installed an appropriate size solar system, you might only be utilising, in this case, 54% of the actual solar energy. The proposed solution in this instance was actually to use solar thermal storage or ice water mix, so that you're actually using solar energy to refrigerate water and even the load, or basically do load shifting. And in this instance, you're actually utilising 84% of the solar, and that actually had a commercial payback period of 7.9 years. So that, combined with a lot of those other low-hanging fruit, actually led to some really viable commercial potential in that energy efficiency, advanced renewable space there. So from a financial perspective, this is a return on investment calculation for the dairy industry and the sites that we examined. And in this case study in particular, including your audit and project management costs, which would be for a project from scratch, pretty much composite to about 90 to 100,000 spent. The total savings were 21,000. And given the accelerated depreciation this financial year being under 150,000, you're able to claim that and some of those larger capital solar projects from an accelerated depreciation perspective. Something to obviously talk with your accountant about, but that can be included in this kind of cash flow analysis. In summary, 110,000 upfront with higher savings in year one, and then recurrent savings of 21,000 from a simple cash flow perspective without looking at the future cost sensitivities of energy. Very generally, 20% return on investment, 4-year payback, and that's typical across the board for dairies to demonstrate and give a flavour of, if there's budget available, what kind of return on investment can you get if you bundle these jelly beans, these 10 to 15 projects together, combined with some advanced solar thermal storage and load shifting. Was really exciting doing some of that work there. Now, there's been a lot of sectors covered, and I know David Hunt from NGIQ is going to be going through nurseries in some of the other webinars coming up I've seen. But some quick findings here. Another really amazing technology that isn't utilised perhaps as much as it could be is heat pumps. So in the left-hand side, you actually see what's called a propagation area, and traditional or old school kind of mode of heating these plants on benches. You've got polypipe running up and down these benches, and it contains or just circulates hot water, warm water. And the aim of this is just to get the root zone of these plants in these trays at 24 degrees, for instance, so that it actually improves the germination. And you've just got some consistency there in a propagation area. Now the photo on the right shows the call it the jug element, or just the electric heating element that basically heats that water, and all the kilowatt hours in result in the megajoules of heat in that water on a 1-for-1 ratio. Now with a heat pump, since the technology actually uses the ambient air and is significantly more energy efficient, you're able to actually use up to 80% less electrical energy to provide the same amount of heating, so that you're putting in a 1-to-5 ratio of electrical energy in to heating out, what's normally called the coefficient of performance, in that's actually quite an efficient technology. So really spectacular potential cost savings for nurseries in that, and that might be the next frontier for a lot of nurseries moving to that technology. Some of the quick wins and some of the self-assessment tools then for nurseries. We'll go over large irrigation pumps in horticulture. Some quick wins there, and just having single phase smaller pumps. Just as one case study, there was a nursery that had 2 bore pumps with similar flow rates, and another pump that you can just see here. Thinking about which pump to actually use, we just used a simple handheld digital energy meter that you can just plug in and plug into your power source, then plug the motor in, and one of the pumps used 900 watts, and in this one used 1077 or 1.077 kilowatts, so a basic 10% saving if you're picking and choosing between of your existing infrastructure, what's more cost effective. It's a little example of how to self-assess and make some smart decisions there, because all these things do add up. Within horticulture, you can see here this picture's a larger packing shed. So there's a few combinations of different types of processes, packing shed, obviously irrigation pumps and water transfer. And very interestingly, in terms of no cost potential savings, we did a lot of work around soil moisture monitoring and monitoring what the soil moisture is at different depth profiles in soil. So at 50 centimeters or 80 centimeters, are you actually overwatering the crop, and that water's infiltrating down past the useful root zone, so that water with the water energy nexus, any water you save is a saving on your irrigation pumps, and therefore energy. And there's a potential crop benefits in there, and that ties into, aside from the on-bill savings, some of those non-energy benefits. A lot of the work that QFF have done has been really great. A lot of irrigation and other pumping savings have been identified. So just a quick couple of lessons learnt here. Anything that's obviously throttled in terms of pumping can be burning through energy, and then looking at variable speed drives, optimizing your pumping to just define what an efficient pump is, and whether it's over specified or you're throttling back and burning through energy. The accuracy of water meters is a common concern. Older water meters, there's a pretty decent case for actually having newer water meters so that you can self-assess and have the right information in regards to flow. And also in this picture here, you can see this is a pulse-enabled water meter. So you can attach a little device that measures every kiloliter that goes through a number of pulses to then basically electronically record your consumption with smart water metering. And smart water metering can be cheaper than smart energy metering, and has some other benefits in terms of basically you can't, or you know, as the old adage goes, you can't manage what you can't measure, and review some of those key benchmarks for energy efficiency. Now, technically that benchmark that we'd normally use would be the energy consumption or kilowatt hours per volume of water, which is megalitres per metre of total dynamic head. And we had a range from anywhere from 3.8 to 9.5 thereabouts in kilowatt hours per megalitre per metre head. So the more inefficient the pump, usually the higher the savings. And definitely pays to review your pump and find what kind of efficiencies are there. You know, looking at pump throttling, some of the quick wins are definitely available there. Some of those other quick wins in regards to refrigeration, a lot of maintenance, cleaning evaporators, having an annual maintenance program does pay for itself. Potential more holistic upgrades of cold rooms in regards to variable speed drives or complete replacement of systems. In this case study, we had the refrigeration technician on site, and the room was designed for another kind of crop, and they basically transferred it over to currently tomatoes. And because of that, the cold room wasn't necessarily fit for purpose, and some VSDs had some significant potential in that case, but in not all instances, variable speed drives or complete retrofits of older equipment stack up. Case by case, that can work. So as an example of a horticulture project, nominally 9.5 in terms of that project management and energy auditing cost for around a $50,000 project, 19,000 in savings this time. And in this instance, with the depreciation, this was quite an attractive project from one of the 10, had a 36% return on investment, or a 2-year or 2.5-year payback period. So really attractive. And what was interesting was actually assessing the financial return on investment from all 10 projects, in that in some instances they wanted to sign up for an energy audit and the program, and we had an internal rate of return or effective return of between 16 to 20% as a blended average across all sites, and that's still quite financially attractive. And given that most of them, for all intents and purposes, were pretty much randomly picked, you know, maybe 1 in 2 or 1 in 3 would have this kind of really attractive return, but from a blended average perspective, really exciting to see that there's really significant potential in energy efficiency in horticulture, and it's definitely something to look at, and another frontier of efficiency in the business to start to capture financially. Now, it's not all financial. In terms of that business case, it's important to consider what some of those non-energy benefits are. So we have the energy or the demand or tariff adjustment savings in terms of the on-bill savings, but it really ties into how am I operating as a business in terms of water security and license to operate, and the fact that we live in a localized environment or ecology, and farm sustainability can quite often go ahead with environmental sustainability hand in hand. From an economic perspective, local community benefits and that increased productivity. Some of those other really important non-energy benefits can be from an energy security perspective. I talked about the thermal energy storage, and if, for instance, you have a brownout or supply issues with ergon, actually being able to do one milking using your existing solar and what you'd call islanding your supply, this technology that's available to use solar to provide for a certain amount of pumping or electricity use. And if you've done the majority of the load the day before with that thermal energy storage, even if it's overcast, that kind of islanding requirement could actually provide for a milking potentially using stored thermal energy. So not necessarily off-grid, but providing for increased security, increased energy services from that thermal energy storage kind of option there as a non-energy benefit, and something to consider. Something we like to do, and just kind of finishing up before we get into questions here, is how do we frame these potential benefits? We had a really good discussion with a dairy farmer, and his point was, okay, we pay 70 cents per litre of milk. We currently have a net profit of 5% or after tax cash, retained earnings, not including salary within the business. as an average across that sector, just using some general numbers, 2.6 megalitres of milk a year. And in that case study before that actually had a 20% return on investment, we asked the question, how much milk would you have to produce that would otherwise go towards that part of the bill that's pretty inefficient that you could otherwise get rid of? And it was 16%, or 200,000 litres of milk. So it's an interesting way to frame the benefits. Say, for instance, if your profit margin in your business is 10% and you've got 10 grand savings, you might have to produce $100,000 worth of crop to provide for that part of the bill that you otherwise might be able to cost effectively get rid of. And draw it on the map. How many hectares is that? Structurally, in some senses, you can consider that an integral part of improving your profit and loss statement and actually improving farm profitability, as well as getting some of those non-energy benefits. So in summary, all those jelly beans really do add up. Review the potential on-bill savings on site. It's been really attractive savings, and really exciting to just see how attractive some of those savings are as a blended average across the savings. So consider all the projects together, assess them financially, consider some of the non-energy benefits. So that thermal storage example, being able to provide increased energy security, or for your supply chain or customers, what's the benefit of being able to reduce your greenhouse gas emissions? Or is there potential to be more water and therefore energy efficient and improve water efficiency and sustainability in areas such as Stanthorpe that have had real bad water security issues? And then ask yourself the question, frame the potential benefits. What are these savings worth to me? How much crop do I actually have to produce to pay for that part of the bill that I could otherwise potentially get rid of? Just as a way of thinking. So that's kind of a summary of some of the lessons learnt and more or less how we think about energy, and I suppose just a few kind of things to reflect on there. So thanks for listening.
Great, Brian, thank you very much for that. A good summary. It was remiss of me not to introduce you properly. I must admit I got distracted by the sight of that large jar of jelly beans, but I do appreciate you joining us, and I'll just give that quick intro now. So you're the Managing Director of Webster's Group, and your group specialises in delivery of high value energy efficiency and sustainability upgrades. And over the past 10 years, you and your group have done some of Australia's most innovative and award-winning initiatives. And you've just celebrated a milestone in 2019, having delivered $10 million in energy, water and gas cost savings.
A lot of jelly beans, a lot of hard work.
That's a lot of jelly beans, yeah.
They all add up.
They
So
sure
what
do.
is the exact number there, Ryan? How many jelly beans have we
So on that number, the drum roll reveal was, and this took a while to count.
Yeah, I bet it did.
Was 1,420 jelly beans in that jar there. So 1.42 million in cost savings.
Yeah, we've had a good response to the poll there, mate.
So who's the winner?
I'll have to uncover that a little bit later. I'll have to look at the report. But we've had 4 people show up that they've won, and we do know some people know the exact number, so we will scrutinise.
Anyone from Webster's Group?
We'll make sure it's not no one from Webster's, and it's not Katrina or John entered.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, that's a good. So that was one jelly bean equals $1,000 over 10 years.
Yep.
So that's $1.4 million in savings.
A lot of litres of milk, a lot of crop.
That's right. Yeah.
Improve profitability.
Just a couple of quick questions. It was good of you to put those financials up on the screen. You put depreciation up, and that's presumably that's the current instant asset write-off regime, is it?
In some instances it is, and in other instances, definitely something to talk to with your accountant, but otherwise, generally some of our consideration included, these are smaller projects. The jelly beans adding up. How do you actually depreciate a electric motor that's more efficient? That's $2,000 or $3,000, and you're structuring different components there to add up. So it does have an impact on the payback, and certainly for the solar thermal and load shifting, that had been something that had a bit of attention in regards to we can go up to 150,000 from a CapEx perspective, and that reduces our taxable or our net profit, and the tax impact there, depending on the company structure, can help add to those series of cash flows in our financial treatment. So yeah, to answer that question, it can help with bigger projects, but otherwise smaller projects. And a lot of those projects were, as you can probably tell, a lot of jelly beans added together. So that's another way to think about it in regards to the depreciation thresholds and what they might be next financial year.
Yeah, yeah. And you talked a bit about the non-energy saving benefits as well, that sort of help add up to, you know, improve the payback. And it was interesting. It reminded me of a horticulture farm I went to where they'd recently put a variable speed drive in. It was too early to have their first power bill after doing that, but they he'd said to me he already noticed he didn't have to run around and fix blown pipes straight away. So can you, just from some of those savings, some of those projects you've done, some of those other anecdotes that you've heard, Ryan, of some of those non-energy benefits?
Yeah, sure. So there's definitely a few categories. One that pops to mind is soil moisture monitoring. So actually having the availability of data to show whether you're below the infiltration point of the root zone or you're basically not having enough water there. There's definitely potential energy savings from understanding with that adage, you can't manage what you can't monitor. So soil moisture sensors do have an energy benefit in that respect, but then the question, and to be honest, I don't personally have the expertise, but from an agronomical point of view, managing root zone stress with regards to moisture availability, you know, that has an impact on crop health, and that's profitability generally. So that's definitely a non-energy or a crop productivity benefit there. You touched base on the maintenance, just being able to have newer, more efficient equipment just in terms of your time. And perhaps in that example of the dairy farms with the 200,000 litres of milk that you have to produce to pay that part of the bill that could otherwise be eliminated, that's just a non-energy benefit straight away in terms of staff time. And to what extent of that's a variable time component or a fixed time component, that's an interesting question. But you know, your time and what you're actually doing on site, just as a couple of things that come to mind off the cuff there, sorry. And I mean, the obvious one is environmental sustainability and being able to perhaps, while financially see, okay, this does have a 20% return on investment, and that's great. The savings can more or less pay for this, and it's quite a profitable project. And just from a business perspective, it makes sense. It's nice to know that, you know, you're contributing, and energy efficiency is a huge part of climate change and the challenge that we've got ahead of us, and how we're doing whatever we can as businesses and as communities to affect that change. So fortunately, it's financially viable, and you know, I suppose that's a nice to know kind of thing, that you've able to get some other benefits, not just for yourself, but for the community as well.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks. Yeah, good. Well put. Yeah, not all of the benefits show up on a balance sheet, do they? So
call to action. Yeah.
Yeah. Ron, just want to ask you too. One thing I like about some of the things that you've said before in the audit, in the recommendation, was around easy wins. So looking out for no cost and low cost things.
Yep.
How can farmers do that themselves? Like, what, you know, if they set aside a couple of hours once a month or once a quarter, what would you recommend?
Alrighty, so it is a way of thinking, but it probably starts with thinking through, okay, what are my major energy users? Most growers would know that. For instance, if one of those is compressed air, an immediate quick win, add to your maintenance schedule, filters, compressed air filters, you'd have around, or you'd have a 2% saving for just changing your compressed air filters. And that actual energy cost is around, in medium sites, around 5 times the cost of the filter. So taking the time to review filters, you're buying a new filter by replacing it for your energy cost. Some of the things around compressors, they produce a lot of heat, and they rely on and are very sensitive to ambient temperature. So one metric, moving from a 32 to a 21 degree ambient environment is one case study. You're actually just basically saying, okay, is my compressor close against a wall? Is it in a room? Can I actually get it in a cooler environment? That 32 to 21 degree ambient change has 3.8% savings, just in regards to not sucking in hot air, as another case study there of something we've seen. So that's basically, is my equipment similar to that example of the condensing unit that's blowing on the milk vat. It's John mentioned when we had a quick look at that a couple of days ago, you know, instead of moving that sideways, could we put a little metal shield or something to just divert the airflow? So
yeah, that could reduce your costs.
Part of that's maintenance, but part of it's what uses a lot of energy, what's wrong, what can I quickly change.
Yeah.
Sorry, you were going to say something, mate?
Yeah, that's just a part of trying to reduce your costs even further for implementing something there. Instead of having an electrician come out and a refrigerator mechanic come out and move your pipes, you can put a simple deflector on there and deflect the heat away instead of spending a bit of money there. So
yeah. So to answer Andrew's question, we're probably up to an hour now. Let's give them, I've got a couple more things here for another hour. I mean, solar systems, if you've got installed solar and you don't actually have an annual maintenance program, the savings do, there's a whole webinar about that in itself, but the savings do pay for the annual maintenance, being $8 to $12 per panel plus travel. Set up the SMS alarms. Some of the sites we went to had solar and they just didn't have any alarms. And the first thing we do is just check the inverter and it's offline. And how long has it been offline for? Oh, look in the bills, 3 months. Okay, turn it back on, quick win. So checking your solar inverter for general alerts, even if you don't have any smart metering or SMS capability, just checking that your existing systems are online. Integrity of insulation, just calibrating temperature sensors for cold rooms, general cold room seals. You could probably make a quick check of this. That would be a few quick things that would take a couple of hours a month. Otherwise, I will make one point about buying at auctions and how you procure equipment. Just doing some quick maths before, a 30 kilowatt electric WEG, say 3-phase 4-pole motor, might cost you $2,500. If that's 70% loaded, 10 hours a day, 13 kilowatts for a larger customer, that might be using 10 grand a year. So the take-home message there is that motor costs $2,500 up front, but it costs in energy 10 grand a year or 100 grand over 10 years. So if you buy something more efficient, even if it costs double the price, the savings just pay for it in a couple of years. And that 100 grand, if you can get a 10% saving over 10 years, it's 10 grand savings. Some of those examples, it might be an interesting activity to actually consider what is an energy efficient replacement for this motor, this pump. If you're not going to do it now, at least put the work into identifying what's efficient. So if and when it breaks, you actually have on hand, you're not in a rush, you know what might cost a little bit more up front, but definitely in the long term overall cost. I suppose that's just a little bit of homework about how to consider maintenance.
Just touching on the solar, sorry, Andrew. Just the solar utilisation and the importance of monitoring, Ryan. What other areas can you load shift on farm? So can you use that in other areas besides the dairy?
Definitely. So it basically relates to storing something hot or something cold, thermal energy storage. I mean, it's basically similar to a battery. It's just a simple battery. So there could be other applications, potentially larger cold rooms, and looking at combining solar with reducing peak demand after hours, so that you can actually improve the return on investment from solar. Otherwise, without that thermal storage, just shifting your energy load in the day, you know, look at all your irrigation shifts, look at how many kilowatt hours per megalitre, and that's just simply getting a new water meter, hopefully, or using the existing one and reading your energy meter, seeing what the most energy intensive energy schedule is, and just put it generally more in the middle of the day. A couple of quick wins once we'd gone to the effort of doing that to a high level of detail in the audits, people, you know, that day, as soon as we'd run the numbers on site, basically shifted their irrigation schedules and improved the optimization of solar. One irrigation schedule might use 6 kilowatts, one might use 10, and the one in the morning was using 10. So they just put the one in the afternoon, the one that used 10 kilowatts per hour, as a quick win. So if you've got solar and you're irrigating, look at your energy meter, your water meter, just do some quick maths there and try and switch things around. Definite no cost immediate wins there to improve the efficiency and utilisation of solar on site.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for a comprehensive answer on that one, Ryan.
Sure.
Just on the, can you give us a bit of a, I know you're doing some more work with horticulture now. Could you give us a bit of an insight into the Energy 240 program you're running with Procom?
So part of the feedback we've had to date in regards to what's the financial return on investment of these projects, sure, it's pretty reasonable at the moment. Something that's causing anxiety is the 2021 ergon tariffs. And in some of these examples, we'd helped structure people's energy tariffs such that they're going to avoid those increases in cost completely. The largest increase we've seen before the prior adjustment from the Queensland Competition Authority was around $80,000. And obvious anxiety, Energy 240 is a remote energy audit that identifies what the increase in tariff cost is. And we've done that more or less at cost with GrowCom just to basically help get some more awareness in that area, because it's something we're getting a lot of calls about, what the future costs in horticulture are because of that tariff change. So, I mean, that is another cost that you can otherwise maybe potentially avoid. I mean, aside from being involved in that program, one of the quick take homes there, if you're sitting around 100,000 kilowatt hours consumption in a year, and you're on the rural tariffs or tariff 62, 65 or 66, those tariffs are changing. You're probably generally aware of that. For larger energy consumption, consumers above 100,000 kilowatt hours, it's kind of worth just checking what that cost would be. And Energy 240 is basically a program to engage an auditor to say, what can we do about that? What's cost effective? Just to answer that specific question. So yeah, it's something to keep an eye out for, definitely. But otherwise, some people have actually achieved significant savings using the transitional tariffs the other way, in that they're using those. A tariff 50, for example, we had an example, or several examples. One of them, a packing shed in Stanthorpe, saved 13,000. We had another one around 10,000, and basically you can move to the tariffs now and save money, or you might kind of might increase the cost. It kind of depends, but that is one area to investigate for sure.
Yeah, great, thanks. Actually, yeah, just on that, we're just about to publish a case study where a farm on the Atherton Tablelands has put some PV on a pump and shifted from a transitional tariff to one of the new tariffs, just doing that irrigation during the day. And they can quite easily irrigate off peak if they need to, but yeah, just it's a change of strategy as well as putting in the PV.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. Fantastic.
Yeah. Ryan, we might leave it there. Thank you very much again for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
For those listening, we will make a copy of the slides and the recording available on the QFF website, and we might sort of distill out a few of those easy wins and some ideas about maintenance too for people to have a look at.
Great idea.
Can I just get you to flick onto that next slide for me, please, Ryan, as well?
Yeah, sorry, my bad. There you go.
Thank you. So we've on our website as well, we have 60 case studies, over 60, including a few videos there. And you can search across a range of sectors and locations and technologies. So you can look for cane farms, we can look for variable speed drives, whatever you want, or refrigeration or anything. It's also, importantly, there's an energy efficient communities program being, it's a Commonwealth Government initiative. It will open for businesses, and that they're saying mid-2020, so any time now. And that offers grants of $20,000. Now, if you're a small business with a turnover of less than 10 million, that's just a straight up grant. If your turnover is over 10 million, it's a 50% grant. But they've specifically set aside 10 million of that $40 million program for dairy farms. So they really want to get some dairy farms taking advantage of some of those energy efficiency initiatives. There's a link to the website there, but if you can't jot that down, just go to the Energy Savers website, and we've written a story about that recently with the links there. But I'd definitely recommend people getting on the mailing list for that, and that way they'll know as soon as the grants are announced for businesses. We've got 2 more webinars coming up in the next couple of weeks, and probably a couple more to come after that. Both around nursery, but the energy efficiency in nursery pumping next week will include a lot of experience from David Hunt in other sectors as well. So I wouldn't just limit yourself to listening in if you're for nursery, but I reckon there'll be some great information there for other sectors, just on general energy efficiency and pumping. And then on the 11th of June, David will talk about some of his specific findings for nurseries, including heating and PV and those kind of things as well. So you can find out more about those on our events page there. And if you've got any other questions, please email us directly at that email address. And I think, John, we're probably we've got 4 winners there for the plug-in energy meters. So we'll just get in touch with them.
Yeah, mate. I can find out who's won those, so I'll get in touch via email.
Tell them the good news, and that'll mean they can use that device that Ryan showed with the single phase pump before, and they can run around and plug it into everything and see how much power everything uses. So
yeah, it's a good little device. You can monitor costs and power consumption, so yeah, it will come in handy.
Fantastic. All right, well, thanks again, Ryan, very much.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Cheers, guys.
Thanks, Rebecca and John, and thanks everyone for joining us. And we'll look forward to the next one on energy efficiency and nursery pumping next week. Thanks very much.
Thank you.